please.
Director Chacon. Director Getty.
Here.
Director Grajeda.
Here.
Director Hawkins. Director Oscui.
Here.
Director Vasquez.
Present.
President Apodaca.
Here. Yeah, you repeat and pledge of allegiance. Yep. Okay.
Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for bringing us all here safely. I want to make this a special day in your honor. I want us to do the business of this district for all of the people and all of the customers that we represent. And may we make the right decision. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag, put your right hand over your heart, and repeat after me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, do we have certification?
Usually don't supposed to.
Public comment and presentations.
We have one presentation. It's Mr. Roland Gonzalez here. Well, you snooze, you lose. Roland Gonzalez would have got his 3-year presentation. We'll do it next month then.
Okay.
That is all.
Walk-in items, do we have any?
None, sir.
Item 4, MWD.
All right, good morning. Have a couple of items I wanted to bring you an update on. First is the Disadvantaged Community Program. Metropolitan has continued their discussions with committee members and members of member agencies to develop a program that would increase water conservation activities, particularly in these areas. And these discussions include developing a pilot program. They have been discussing 3 potential approaches that include a regionally administered direct install program, locally administered program under the current member agency manager's allocation program, and third, the regional program incentives. So the discussions right now have led to the third item to increase regional program incentives, particularly on high-efficiency toilets. And targeted areas would include multifamily units developed before 1994, which typically can have significant benefit from new water-saving devices. So there will be continued discussions in the next couple of months, and we will keep you updated as this program further develops. And then I wanted to bring you an update on the California Water Fix. They have the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority and then the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority. The Design and Construction Authority, they recently held a meeting last month in August to adopt several resolutions establishing policies for the newly formed agency. And the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority, they recently met and approved their operating budget of $550,000 for this current fiscal year. Also, the Finance Authority approved resolutions to adopt debt management policy and investment policies. The Construction Authority established a transition staff that will support activities until it completes its effort to recruit long-term staff, which is expected by the end of this calendar year. So included in the transition staff, Metropolitan has provided 5 of their staff members to support areas in engineering, information technology, environmental contracting, and real property. So that concludes my update on Metropolitan. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, anyone? No questions. Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Gadget, do you have any comments?
No additional comments.
Director Wesky?
No additional comments, Mr. Chairman.
If not, we'll go to item 5, disclosure training.
Good morning, directors. Today before you, our bond counsel will be conducting the debt disclosure training. As you're aware, we're in the midst of refinancing part of the district's debt, and we recently updated the actual debt disclosure policy within the last few months. So with that, we're trying to maintain compliance with federal regulations on issuing debt. So with that, Mr. Doug Brown. You have to point it.
Okay. Good morning, directors. My name's Doug Brown with the law firm of Stradling Yoka. We've been your bond counsel for many years now, and starting in 2016, we started providing both the staff and the board with disclosure training. And as I explained in 2016, that's in part to make sure you're aware, your board, as well as your staff, is aware of their obligations under federal securities law. But it was also a recognition that the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the federal agency that deals with the securities markets, had started paying closer attention to the municipal market and disclosure in the municipal market. Since 2016, the SEC has continued that increased interest in the municipal market. As many of you may be aware, there's a current SEC investigation going on with respect to Montebello Unified School District, for example. So they continue to be active in the municipal credit markets. So with that, I will proceed. The presentation in front of you is I will skip over certain slides. This was originally directed to your staff, but I will go over it to highlight for you both the district's obligation as well as the obligation of board members, at least as far as the Securities and Exchange Commission is concerned. So first of all, why is disclosure necessary? The district periodically issues securities in the public credit markets, and the federal securities laws protect investors in the municipal securities. That's important to remember. The Securities and Exchange Commission is not here to protect the district. It's here to protect the rights of investors in the district's securities. And generally speaking, the obligation of the district is to provide all material information to investors. So there's two Federal Securities Act. One is the Securities Act of 1933, which if you were a public company, you'd actually be required to register your securities with the SEC in advance. You're not a public company, and therefore you don't have to comply with that section. However, you do have to comply with the anti-fraud rules, and the anti-fraud rule in the 33 Act prohibits any person, and person is defined to include public agency, so it includes the district. So it prohibits the district from directly or indirectly obtaining money or property by means of an untrue statement of a material fact or a misleading omission. Important thing there is you really have two obligations. What's included in your offering document has to be accurate. But more importantly, and this is where most enforcement actions occur, you can't omit material information. And that, interestingly, that's both information that's materially positive or materially negative. And the cases make clear that mere negligence results in liability. Next slide. The second act, Federal Securities Act, is called the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. It includes a Rule 10b-5. It regulates brokers and dealers, such as the underwriters you deal with, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and the like, as well as relating to public agencies. While there was some suggestion early on that it didn't apply to public agencies, an amendment in 1975 made that clear. If you go on to the next page, we have the text of 10b-5, again, unlawful for any person, which includes the district, to employ any device, scheme, or artifice to defraud, or to make any untrue statement of a material fact, or omit to state a material fact necessary in order to make the statements made in the light of the circumstances under which they're made not misleading. It's a long way of saying the same thing I just mentioned. You have to be both accurate in the offering document, and you can't omit material information. I guess, which is sometimes typical, materiality is not defined in either of these statutes, and as a result, we rely upon case law, which mostly relates to private companies, and enforcement actions. And as I mentioned, there have been a lot of enforcement actions against public agencies in recent years. But generally, lawyers like myself would tell you it's material if there's a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor or prospective investor would consider the information important in deciding whether or not to invest.
Materiality is determined in the context of all facts and circumstances, but remember, in most cases, it's in hindsight, right? If there's an enforcement action, they've arrived on the scene, there's already in the SEC's perception an issue, and so as a result, you have to be, as you think about what's material, keep in mind you're going to be defending, or you or your staff or your lawyers are going to be defending that after the SEC is already on the scene and already has a belief that something is effective. So as I usually tell people, as we have a discussion about whether something is material or not, remember you might be asked to justify your decision in a deposition with a bunch of lawyers sitting around the table. So typically we tell people if there's even any suggestion that things are material, it's important to disclose that in the offering document. There's 3 levels of culpability under the federal securities laws. Number 3, the most serious, intent to defraud. And there have actually been cases recently of a municipality in New Jersey that literally had 2 sets of books. Ones that they showed the public and one which was the real one. That is a case where the lawyers say there was scienter, meaning there was intent to defraud people. The lowest level of liability is negligence. The middle level is recklessness. Typically, municipal enforcement actions relate to negligence. And typically they end in settlements where people neither admit nor deny negligence, but they agree not to violate the securities laws on a go-forward basis. And we're going to talk in a bit about some recent enforcement actions that are relevant to the district. So, what should be disclosed? Unlike corporate securities, there's no line item set of rules. And so in the end, the district has to use its own good judgment. While you've engaged law firms, your general counsel firm, our firm, you've advised a municipal advisor, at the end of the day, these offering documents are the district's documents, and as a legal matter, the district is responsible for what's in there. And it's often the case that people forget that the lawyers and the financial professionals only know what they have been told. And if they haven't been told something that's going on, there's no way for them to give advice with respect to that. And we'll get into a couple of examples of that when we talk about recent enforcement actions. So when do the disclosure rules apply? 3 instances. 1, when you do a new offering. So the district is expecting to issue refunding bonds sometime later this fall, and the federal securities laws apply in connection with that refinancing. Secondly, the district files annual reports each year electronically on a website that's called EMMA, and the 10b-5, the federal securities laws will apply to that annual report as well. And then finally, in rare circumstances where the issuer, generally meaning the board president or the general manager, is speaking publicly to the market. So for example, the example I use is if your general manager is on a panel at Aqua, and the title of the panel is Financial Effects of the Drought, and the general manager walks in and he sees in the front row representatives from Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and the rating agencies, he's on notice that he is speaking to the market in that circumstance, and he has an obligation to be both truthful as well as provide all material information under that circumstance. That rule does not apply to this board meeting, does not apply to a board member speaking at Rotary. It only applies in the narrow instance where a senior person is speaking in a situation where they should know that financial professionals are there. So the district disclosure document that you're going to be dealing with at your next board meeting is an official statement, which is the offering document to investors. As we mentioned, it's required to include all material information. We've already mentioned it is your document, and we've also mentioned that while there are a number of financial professionals who will assist you, at the end of the day, as a legal matter, it's your document. That was made very clear by the SEC. Many of you probably remember Orange County, California, which filed bankruptcy in the 1990s. And the SEC depositions of the county commission, the county board of supervisors indicated the county board of supervisors had not even looked at any of the official statements that had been on their agendas. So one of the important
points I'd like to make to you is you're going to be receiving a draft of the official statement in connection with the approval, most likely in October. And part of your obligation as a board member is not to make sure every comma is in the right place and period is in the right place, but it is part of your obligation to review that document and satisfy yourself that the information is accurate and that no material information is omitted. And if you've got concerns about that draft official statement that comes in your agenda, I'd encourage you to speak to your staff in advance of the meeting, or you can raise the issues, at the October meeting. But that's really your opportunity to demonstrate that you've discharged your obligation to have reviewed that official statement. So a couple of principles. It's important to provide the main points, but not to overwhelm the readers with detail. As you all know, several months ago, the district made amendments to its existing debt documents and set up a fixed payment account, in effect a lockbox for the standby charge. So there'll be significant information in the official statement about the standby charge, who pays the standby charge, what the history of standby charge collections have been. That will be in addition to the normal information about water sales. During all of these discussions with your staff, we've been careful to maintain the attorney-client privilege. And again, this is why I would encourage you, if you do have issues you would like to discuss, we'd encourage you to discuss them with general counsel or the general manager in advance of the meeting, so that, because we'll have a better opportunity to have a meaningful discussion if it's done in that manner. Oh, my apologies. Oh, it's your financial advisor calling. The timing considerations. As I mentioned, we will be bringing a draft of the preliminary official statement to you, most likely in October, for review and approval. That's called a preliminary official statement, but it's only preliminary because the actual bonds have not yet been sold, so we don't know the interest rates and the principal amount. In all other respects, it is final. And in fact, after your board approves it, your general manager, under the federal securities laws, is required to certify that it's deemed final, meaning it is accurate and no material information has been omitted. And only after your general manager gives that certification can that official statement be sent out to the market. In a perfect world, there are no changes from that POS through closing unless something new and different happens here at the district. So we are trying to be mindful of other things that are likely to occur. The district budget, for example, we are waiting until your audit is complete before we publish the official statement. You don't want to publish an official statement and then have an audit come out and have numbers that are slightly different. So we are trying to time this in a way where we won't be in a situation where we have to amend that document. So I will skip over the next slide. That's really a discussion of how we've worked with your staff internally. Go on to the next one, which is current topics. The SEC and the market in general is currently interested in a number of issues, but two that relate to you are the status of fund balances and reserves, as well as accounting practices. And we're going to have a discussion in a minute about a relatively recent, last couple of years, settlement with Westlands Water District, which related to how they accounted for revenues and an allegation by the Securities and Exchange Commission that the way they accounted for those was designed to make their coverage calculations look better than the SEC believed they actually were. You can see why that has some relevance for you as a district, because there's been some struggle to meet the rate covenants here over the last several years. So a reminder that tomorrow's hot topic can be different than today's. I remind people, back in 1999, we spent many hours and many pages writing about Y2K. And as you all know, Y2K didn't amount to anything at all. But the SEC and others believed it was important. it's important to read the disclosure with fresh eyes, and that's one of the important roles you as directors have, is you're going to be reviewing this document with a director's perspective as opposed to the perspective of your staff or your outside consultants. As I mentioned, if you do think there's something of concern, raise the issue, and we will discuss it with the working group. We always tell everybody there's no such thing as a stupid question. It's better that the question gets asked up front and gets addressed so that, there's not difficulties later on. An important point is that political sensitivity and confidentiality are not exceptions to disclosure. For those of you who were on the board 5 or 6 years ago, in 2014, there was some effort to undertake a refinancing. And given all of the various investigations and the like that were going, and litigation that was going on at the time, our firm ultimately had to recommend to you and your staff not to move forward with the transaction because there were confidential matters that could not be disclosed, which were in fact material. So it's important to remember that just because something is politically sensitive or confidential doesn't mean it doesn't need to be disclosed. If there's something which truly can't be disclosed, that means the financing cannot move forward. You have to just put it on hold. As we mentioned, the securities laws also apply to the annual reports you file. Your staff files these each year. They include the audit, updates of certain information, and additional voluntary information if necessary. To date, the district staff has a good history of getting these filings done in a timely manner. And as many of you know, the Securities and Exchange Commission had a project a couple of years ago where they cracked down on public agencies who were not timely in their filings. And obviously the district was not included in that because they had a good record of making those filings. Just briefly, I'll touch on investor communication. Again, a lot of this is directed to staff, but there's no obligation of the district to speak to individual investors. And sometimes that strikes people as odd because you're a public agency and the staff is used to interacting with the public. But generally speaking, you need to be careful when investors or people who purport to be investors call and ask about the financial status of the district, for example. You don't know whether that person really is an investor or isn't an investor, and you don't know why that investor is calling. He or she may be calling to try to get inside information and then may go out and trade the securities. So we stress to staff, and we would stress to you as board members, be cautious in dealing with anyone who purports to be an investor, because you may find yourself in a situation where someone allegedly is using inside information to trade the bonds. We encourage a single point of contact, and here at the district, your chief financial officer is the single point of contact. So we'd encourage everybody, if you get inquiries from people who say they own your bonds, refer those over to your CFO. Your CFO has been trained and he knows not to release inside information, but instead to refer investors to only information which is publicly available. Your budgets, your financial, your reports. We had a lot of these questions during the drought. Investors would call and want to know what's going on with the drought, how's it affecting you? And the answer we told people, always refer them to whatever the most recent report that staff has filed with the board. Don't go beyond what's publicly available. So topics of recent SEC enforcement actions, it's inadequate pension disclosures. In California, we're a little bit fortunate. Most public agencies are in PERS, and PERS puts out extensive financial information. Misleading or incomplete financial disclosures, we'll talk about Westlands in a minute. Failed economic development projects, not something you typically get involved in. Failure to disclose missed continuing disclosure filings, as I mentioned earlier. Your staff has a good history of making those filings in a timely manner. As I mentioned, the SEC has become increasingly aggressive in recent years. The SEC has a large enforcement staff, a large municipal market enforcement staff in San Francisco. That may be, maybe not, but it may be the reason there are so many enforcement actions in California. It's because these enforcement officials are located right here. If you had asked me 5 or 6 years ago how a typical SEC investigation of a public agency ends, I would have said it ends with a settlement where people neither admit nor deny any liability, but there rarely, if ever, is any public fines or anything more serious. That's no longer true. Almost every municipal settlement involves a fine paid by the agency, and in some cases, it involves fines paid by staff. And in a rare circumstance, it involved a fine paid by a mayor because it was determined that that mayor had gotten himself very involved in the activities. So he sort of exceeded, what typically, a mayor would do. So again, it is increasingly more serious to the point where in very egregious cases, officials, city managers and the like have been barred from any future involvement in the municipal finance industry. And if you think about that, effectively means that city manager is never going to have a city manager's job ever again because he's not going to be able to deal with, with the next city's financial results. As I said, I wanted to talk about Westlands Water District for a minute. As you know, it's a very large agricultural water district here in California. They had entered into an SEC settlement a couple of years ago. The allegations had been that the way they accounted for revenues, which they believe they had generated to hold in reserve for a drought, and then they recognized those revenues later in the year of the drought. The SEC was concerned initially that the accounting was incorrect. Ultimately, the settlement didn't allege that the accounting was incorrect, but what the settlement said was the accounting had been done for the purpose of increasing their coverage in the later year. And so that's a reminder to everybody that while I know everybody monitors their coverage calculations and everybody undertakes efforts to make sure they comply with their coverage obligation, there is an obligation to disclose whether any activity has occurred which was done primarily for the purpose of meeting the rate covenant. When the official statement comes to you next month, there's going to be some detailed discussion of the projections that were included in the 2016 official statement that was done in connection with that financing, and what your actual results were. As you're all aware, the district did not meet its coverage obligations in 17 and may not have met it in 2018. So there's going to be a discussion of that, and we'd encourage all of you to review that and make sure you think that discussion is accurate and doesn't omit any material information. And there's also going to be some greater discussion of the projections that the staff is undertaking now for the next 5 years. And again, if you have any concerns about those projections, whether they're how much water is being sold to individual cities or water districts, or what the standby charge will result in, or whether it's an accurate representation of what you believe the operating expenses will be over the next 5 years, it would be important for you to raise that with your staff and with us, in advance of that meeting. So, consequences of bad disclosure. Number one, an SEC investigation. They are very expensive. You're dealing with a federal agency that has relatively unlimited resources, like a lot of other regulatory agencies. And most public agencies have limited resources. So these investigations tend to get to 7-figure legal fees pretty quickly. There's adverse publicity. Generally speaking, SEC investigations are confidential unless the public agency chooses to disclose them. But all settlements end up being announced through press release by the SEC. So eventually, any settlement becomes public. As I mentioned, you may have reduced market access, and in fact, your district was essentially out of the public credit markets for a year or two because we weren't able to disclose certain material information. So that's an example of you were not able to refinance debt and get interest rate savings as a result. And that's what happens to public agencies that have an ongoing SEC investigation. Typically, they can't enter the market. You may have to impose new procedures and oversight. Now, we believe we're ahead of the game here. Your district has had disclosure policies in place since about 2014 or 2015. They were updated earlier this year to reflect, changes in enforcement activity. And then in addition, your staff has received disclosure training since 5 or 6 years ago. Your board received disclosure training in 2016 and this year. So the disclosure policies and disclosure training are high on the SEC's list of best practices. And then there can be rating downgrades that occur. The rating agency policy these days seem to be that ratings are suspended as soon as there's an indication there's an SEC investigation going on. So a suspended rating could lead to lack of market access, or for example, you have right now, until the refinancing occurs, variable rate debt outstanding. That variable rate debt interest rate could increase significantly if your rating had been suspended. So those are the consequences of bad disclosure. So just in summary, and I know this was a long time to listen to a lawyer, and I apologize, but investors must be provided all material information, as I said earlier, when in doubt, disclose. It's important that officials, including board members, be involved in the process because we need to know that all the right people were in the room assisting in the development of the document. Top management must support and encourage a vigorous disclosure program, and I can report your staff has done a good job on that. The officials must receive disclosure training. That's what we're doing this morning. It's important to retain the attorney-client privilege. That's why we've encouraged you, if you do have issues, to raise that with your general counsel, myself, or your staff first before it's raised more generally. And then we always encourage people to adopt a formal disclosure policy, which you have already done. So as I said, you're ahead of the game there on that. So that's my brief overview. Happy to answer any questions if anybody on the board has questions. Yes, sir.
Doug, a lot of information you want the board to review it. So, and you're thinking that this is going to come before the board in October. So, will the board be given a couple of weeks or plus to review this documentation?
That's something to raise with your staff about how much time you would need. Again, it's important, I think at this stage, it's important that you all have adequate time, and if that means a little bit of delay in the approval, that's important. But I would defer to your staff as to, on the timing.
In our case, we have a very tight schedule because of the bonds have to be refinanced in that. However, we already have a draft preliminary official statement, and I believe within a week or so we'll have it well enough. We should be able to get it to the board 2 weeks ahead of time if that's how much time you'd like.
Well, I'm going on what you said, not what my staff said. You put it on me that I'm supposed to be reviewing all this stuff. So I'm looking at you to look at them and say, hey, how much time do they need to review this and ask us questions if they have it? So it's really a call to you, not to my staff, because this training has been put on by you. I'm looking at it. It looks like you put me on notice that I'm supposed to do a few things, which I don't have a problem with, but need time.
Understand. And again, the document is probably going to be about 40 or 50 pages that need to be reviewed. So if a week is inadequate, I think you'd let us know, and we'll get it done quicker than that. I think you normally have about a week, right?
Our board packet's gone a week early, but what I'm telling the director is that we'll get it out 2 weeks early, so he'll have time to review it if 2 weeks is what he wants. Each individual assimilates information at a different speed, so we have to provide the amount of time that the slowest of the directors would like. So whichever director asks for the time, if a week's enough, fine. If 2 weeks is when you want it, but we have a preliminary draft right now.
Mr. Chairman, I know that there has been a request by Director Hawkins to have a workshop on this matter. I believe during the last board meeting, he mentioned possibly having a workshop. So if that is an option, that might be something that we may be interested in doing.
So I don't recall what workshop Director Hawkins has.
Okay, well,
If you could let me know.
I recall him saying, this is some really complicated stuff. We might want to have a workshop on this to make sure that we're carefully going through all of the information. So maybe if he's interested in doing that, or maybe some of the board members can meet individually with our finance director to go through the document before the board meeting. That would suffice as well.
Whatever the board wishes, we can have a special workshop, again, at least 2 weeks before. But
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Doug, or Kevin for that matter, you can answer that. What is essentially in the POS? The POS, we've had meetings with you on a number of occasions. There have been information that you have provided. How materially would the POS be different from what you have already presented to us?
I think the POS is basically three pieces. One, it's a description of all the legal documents around that. And you all approved the legal documents many months ago, so that portion is presumably...
That's the first checkbox.
Yeah, that's pretty much completed. The second is there's just general information about the district, your service territory, who the retail agents are, who you sell to, a physical description of the recycled water system. So that's basically text that describes
the
the district.
directors, we already know that.
You already know that, correct. And so you should be able to read through that pretty quickly, I would assume. And then there's the financial information. And the financial information is the last 5 years of water sales, standby charge collections, et cetera, and a summary of your audited financial statements for the past 5 years, including coverage. And then there is 5 years of projected information. So it's the same information. Projected water sales by retail agency, projected standby charge increases, and then your projected debt service coverage. And as I mentioned, I think there's going to be special attention paid to that this year because there were projections included in 2016, which for whatever reason, ended up not being met. And so people are going to be careful about that this time.
And we have discussed that. And Andrew, I hate to put you on the spot, but how many times do you think in the last 6 months we have been talking about revenues in the past 5 years and projections in the next 5 years, either as a part of the budget preparation or when we were getting ready to do the same things, the same exercise that we're going through right now? We have touched on that subject from what I remember at least 4 or 5 times here in an open meeting.
Yeah, my answer was going to be every day, but with the board, I think at least that kind of frequency, so yes. One more thing I was going to say is we're going to be discussing the schedule for the refinancing coming up. And the Finance Committee is going to be the second Thursday, and there's other committee. The name of that committee is Admin and Finance.
New name.
Yes, it is a new name. So the agenda will be posted approximately the second Monday, and we have our board meeting on the fourth Monday. So if the staff can make everyone aware of we will be sure to make everyone aware of the Admin and Finance Committee agenda, which will have the POS approximately 2 weeks prior to the fourth Monday, the regular board meeting in October.
And perhaps you can expand on the agenda of that particular meeting, which I think is October the 11th, and make that into a workshop of some sort.
yeah,
Right?
I think that'll work, and then any director who wants to can attend, but we should, if we do that, we need to notice it as a workshop so all the directors can participate. So why don't we plan on doing that if it's the board's pleasure?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Consent calendar. We have,
Excuse me. It might be against the law to serve me on the dais. Thank you.
consent calendar
Can you make a copy
from
of
6 to 13. Whatever anyone wanting to pull any of them, if not, to have a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second?
I'd like to pull item 6. Item 8, purchase statement, and item 12.
Directors, there was a motion on the floor. May I ask who made the motion and who seconded it?
I did.
First. What was your second?
I'll go ahead and withdraw my second so that he can pull the items.
So then we
Would you like at this point just have staff make the report on 6A and 12, and at that time you can consider approving the whole consent calendar?
So move to approve the balance.
Second?
What was that motion, John, please?
Move to approve the balance. Roll call, please.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director Osculi?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes. Okay, let's go back to those items.
Mr. Chair, just on the minutes, there was 3 questions asked. One about the lawyers provide a briefing. There was a question on the report on AB 1794, and there was a comment on, well, that's fine. I didn't get anything back from staff on those questions in the minutes. Did anybody else, or is that gonna happen some other time, or what?
I'm sorry, I must have missed it. There were questions on the minutes of...
Director Vasquez stated she had reviewed some of the legal bills and requested that the lawyers provide a briefing on the work that they were doing and asked to schedule a meeting.
Yes, and Director Vasquez, have you had a meeting with the attorney?
I did make that request at our last meeting for there to be a meeting before the actual date that we were asked to approve the legal fees, and I never heard from the lawyers. So what I did receive from Kevin was I received a copy of the legal bills, but I never received a briefing. So I will make that request once again.
I believe, Director, we set up a process now at your request that either the Thursday or the Friday before the board meeting, we'll review both the legal bills and the board packet. So we're going to do that going forward.
Moving forward.
Yes.
That's what I do. And then there was a staff statement about AB 1794. I believe you're going to get back with me on that. The statement in the finance report...
Was wrong.
Okay, so...
Yeah, we'll get that correct. Yeah, the statement in the Finance Committee, and Andrew and I have talked about it, stated that the budget was over because of AB 1794, and that was not the case.
All right. And then regarding imported waters, number 12, reading the staff report, I was a little bit perplexed. It says we had requests from 2 agencies for a signal, but then the contract looks like it's between Central Basin and Municipal Water District and MWD. So is the device solely going to the individual agency? And if it is, why are we involved in the contract?
I will try to address that question. Basically, as a member agency of Metropolitan, anything that happens, Metropolitan cannot do any agreement directly with the retail agency. We have to be involved in everything. So that is why Metropolitan has sent us a letter to Central Basin stating your responsibility, your retail agency's responsibility to abide by the restrictions in using this equipment. They outline all those specifics. So what we have done is we have done a letter agreement, Central Basin, with the retail agency. This is basically the same thing of what our letter agreement is with Metropolitan. So if anything were to happen, the obligation would fall on the retail agency.
It's a fairly simple agreement. It's just that I don't see anything regarding, and I'm not sure if we should, litigation costs? Or is that in the agreement also?
Litigation costs? That would probably involve the attorney-client privilege information.
Well, if there's litigation costs and we have to defend ourselves, that falls to the agencies to pay us back for our litigation costs with that.
Yeah, for pending matters, we should be careful about how we disclose that, but for matters that have been concluded.
I'm just, all I'm saying, Alfred, is that I'm looking at this and I'm just it's a fairly simple agreement. All they want is power to run their meter, 420 amps. And they already had it. But in the case of La Mirada, I guess they had to move it to a new location, so they lost it. And then that's requiring this now. So you reviewed this agreement with both, I guess it's going to be with Cerritos and with Suburban. And your recommendation is that this is a good agreement?
Yeah, it's okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to approve items, the ones I pulled, 6, 8, and 12.
Second that.
Roll call, please.
Director Chacon?
What do we vote on, please?
This is to approve the items that were pulled, 6, 8, and 12.
And what item were those?
Those were the minutes.
And item number 12, which is, in this case, the imported water service connection power signal agreements.
Between?
I'm sorry, Tammy, I just...
No, that's okay. No, not a problem. So this was part of the consent calendar. It was pulled for further discussion, and it's the imported water service connection power signal agreement. There is a letter agreement between Central Basin and Metropolitan Water District, and there's a letter agreement between Central Basin and the retail agency. Specifically on the retail agency, we have 2 of them, Cerritos and then Suburban Water System. They want to use power that's already established on the Metropolitan Imported Water Service Connection. They want to use a part of that power to run their own system. And so basically, they have to, there was a process where they have to establish their own cabinet agreement next to Metropolitan's equipment. And then we have to have this agreement in place in case there were ever any damages or anything, were to happen, we would be protected on that. But what was happening in the past was that they were using the equipment in Metropolitan's cabinet, and you're not allowed to do that. So this is just something that they use their own equipment, utilize the power from Metropolitan, but we have these letter agreements in place just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we know why they're using that equipment.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Yes.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director Schooley?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes.
President Apodaca?
Yes. Item 13, discussion of recycled water customer development.
No, we can
Oh,
we're on item 14.
14, I'm sorry. Fiscal year 2017-2018 draft comprehensive annual fund report.
Good morning again. Staff and our new auditor, the Poon Group, we've been diligently preparing and conducting the annual financial audit, like we've said, to meet the refinancing schedule, which we will obviously, as I've alluded to, discuss that in a little while under a separate agenda item. Good news is we're 2 to 4 months prior to the last fiscal years in bringing this CAFR to you. There's a few items I want to highlight before I introduce Mr. Poon from the Poon Group. And first is that we have an enhanced income statement. If you see the prior CAFR, we just kind of had like 3 lines for the operating revenue. We've broken some of that out. Some of the concerns that we've heard is, people want to know maybe what revenue is to the district, like our administrative surcharges and our water meter service charge per CFS. So we've highlighted and included those. Also, as was mentioned, and I think we've updated the board in the past, we did miss the DCR, the debt coverage ratio for this year. It's currently calculated at 0.96. We did implement GASB 75, which relates to the other post-employment benefits. that will be discussed. Mr. Poon is going to mention that. And then don't forget, too, the impact to our cash and investments of approximately $1.5 million when we defease the debt. That was mentioned earlier in the training, and that was about $1.5 million. So again, our auditor, they have 4 offices nationwide, and Mr. Poon is here to present the fiscal year results.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, Board of Directors. Thank you again. My name is Ken Poon. I'm from the Poon Group, also the founder of my audit firm. So, present to you today is the comprehensive annual financial report for the year end June 30, 2018. I know it's even though it's a draft, but most of the numbers are here pretty final. So we are going through our quality control process, so to make sure everything, all the footnote disclosure and everything ties out to the financial statement. So, just a little bit about myself. Been in the industry for over 18 years in doing public accounting and auditing for state, local government, and our firm has successfully navigated the 2 bankrupt cities, both City of Stockton and City of San Bernardino. So we're still current their current financial auditors. So we're committed to the industry, including taking on Central Basin as a new client. We basically do all the due diligence. We committed ourselves to make sure that the financial statement are issued before September 30 to make sure in order to assist the district to do the refinancing in the upcoming months. So also I'm being honored to be appointed at the Cal Society CPA as the chair of the terms of 2018-2020, the Governmental Accounting and Auditing Committee for the state. So just a little bit about my presentation here, not only about myself, but it's more closer to your audit here. We'll go through the audit responsibility. It's very important that you understand your responsibility as the district and then also our responsibility as the auditors on these financial statements. We'll go through a little bit about the approach to the audit, just in case how we accomplish our responsibility and present to you the financial statement. We'll focus a little bit about the financial statement. We'll pull up the key pension and OPEB information for you. And last but not least is talk about the audit results. As management yourself, you are fully responsible for these financial statements. So by presenting these financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principle in the United States of America, Central Basin is a municipal government. So that's why we are following the Governmental Accounting Standard Board. Whatever that they issue in the pronouncement, the district are required to follow that. And currently, GASB has issued all the way up to 90 new pronouncement, and majority of them are actually either due or it's already implemented into these financial statements. For example, the new one that we just implement is statement number 75 relating to other post-employment benefits, and I'll go through that in detail when I get to the numbers. You also need to adopt sound accounting policy. It's very important that you establish and maintain proper internal control over financial reporting and compliance. When we are here, you are providing all the supporting evidence to the amount and the disclosure in the financial statement by presenting these financial statements in all material respect. Free of material misstatement, whether due from fraud or errors. And last but not least, you do need to have programs to detect and prevent fraud. Our responsibility is to perform this audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standard, but also at the same time we perform this audit in accordance with governmental accounting, government auditing standard, which is the Yellow Book standard, which means that we are also required to communicate to you any findings that it deems to be material weaknesses or significant deficiency in another report. We communicate with those charged with governance, and we determine the board here is those charged with governance, and that's why I'm here today to present our report and to have the two-way communications. We assess the audit risk of material misstatement on the internal control over financial reporting. We determine the fairness presentation of these financial statements, render our audit opinion, and last but not least is to issue our management letter comment if there is any. The approach to the audit is actually break it down into 4 different phases. When we first got the contract back in June, we actually start immediately about the detailed planning. We pick it up from the prior auditors, review the financial reviewed the prior year financial statement and the audit work paper from the predecessor auditor. Also identify any unique situation, including the refinancing situation, looking at new GASB pronouncement in order for us to determine our audit plan for the fiscal year. Phase 2 is the risk-based audit approach, so we are required to look at your understanding your internal control and kind of evaluate the internal control. So a couple areas that it deems to be very, very significant in these financials, including the financial reporting. We look at the bank reconciliation. We look at how you do your journal entries and closing your books. We also look at the revenue types, the billings and cash receipt to the customer. Also take a look at the expense and cash disbursement. Payroll is very, very important because it takes a lot of it is a big amount for the district besides the purchase of the water. So we take a look at the payroll and all the related liabilities, including the retiree benefits, including pension and the medical expenses. We also did perform a general IT control and take a look at the security on these IT system. Then coming down to phase 3 is the validation of account balance. So basically we focus a lot on the balance sheet and income statement. We test through all these significant amount through the testing of the amount by looking at the reconciliation performed by the district. We also look at the analysis, confirmation coming out from the third parties, including banks and attorneys, and last but not least is also looking at the board minutes to identify any disclosure that we need to be included in these financial statements. And last but not least, phase 4 is the reporting phase, which actually we assist the district in preparing the financial statement and issue our audit opinion. So let's take a look at the overview of these financial statements. This year, before I go into the numbers, this year is very important because it's the first year implementing GASB Statement Number 75, which is the other post-employment benefit accounting, which is the first year recording the liabilities on the face of the balance sheet. So as of June 30, 2018, and also I'm putting 2017, even though it's not really audited by our firm, but also you can see the comparison. Total asset is about $90 million compared to 2017. You have almost like $96 million. The deferred outflow of resources, that's actually it's a new element that GASB actually putting it out. Normally the deferred outflow of resource and also in underneath the liability you also see the deferred inflow of resources. Those actually are the two elements that account for some deferral item that is actually coming out from bond refinancing, some deferred amount that was actually included in your last refunding amount, but also at the same time there are a lot of deferrals elements from the pension and OPEB accounting. So as of June 30, 2018, the total deferred outflow, which is similar to a prepaid asset, $4.8 million, and then the deferred inflow, the resource of $742, which is the deferred inflow is similar to the unearned. Total liability, $64.6 million compared to last year, $59 million, and keep that in mind, this year we add up the new liability, which is the other post-employment benefit of about like $9 million. So I'm expecting the liability is going up. Also, the net position, the net investment in capital asset, $31 million compared to last year, $29.3 million. Total restricted, which is restricted for debt service, is the amount that is in your fiscal agent, $2.2 million, pretty similar to prior year. And then remaining the unrestricted, and this year, as you can see, it's actually drive it to a deficit position of $3.8 million compared to last year. You have $10.5 million of unrestricted net position. So the total net position, $29.8 million. Let's take a look at the income statement. Total operating and non-operating revenue added up to $37 million compared to last year, $53 million. So basically, the major decrease is actually due to the pass-through reduction, the pass-through revenue to other agency of about like $12.8 million. Operating expenses actually significantly drop it down to, because the pass-through also have it's a pass-through, so basically reduce the same amount from the operating expenses. So current year, you have $41 million of total expenses between both operating and non-operating, compared to last year, $56 million in total. So the total net change in net position was about like $4.1 million in deficit compared to last year, $3.2 million. As you can tell, the $4 million of loss is actually, majority of the losses is most likely is non-cash, because the depreciation and the amortization, both of these items are close to about like $4 million. That means your revenue did not actually your rate did not actually incorporate any depreciation including in your rate. So let's take a look at the cash flow statement. Cash is king. So basically, we convert everything from accrual basis to cash basis. So cash flow from operating activities is about like $1.9 million deficit compared to 2017, $3.1 million. So it's a really cash outflow for the operating activities. Also, the cash flow from non-capital financing activities, which include grant revenue, and also we include the standby charge of $3.2 million in that 3.5. So that's actually that one I'm still debating whether that the standby charge actually needs to be reclassified back to the operating cash flows from operating. So that's why your cash flows from operating, instead of a $1.9 million deficit, and we'll change it to $1.1 million positive cash flows for the operations. Also, cash flow from capital and related financing activities, $6 million outflow. So it's actually building up your capital, your infrastructure, $6 million right there. Cash flow from investing activities is really from your investment earnings, $202,000. So at the end of the day, your cash compared to prior year is dropped by $4.3 million. Compared to 2017, it only drops about like from 2016, it's only $760,000 right there. Very important, pension and OPEB is really a complicated GASB statement, and I would like to pull the information out, even though it is already included on the face of a financial statement. So as of June 30, 2018, let's take a look at the pension first. The district is a participant of the CalPERS system. So since the district has less than 100 participants, so basically you are part of the cost-sharing pool from the CalPERS miscellaneous plan. The last measurement date, which is done as of June 30, 2017, which is also representing the liability that was reflected on the face of the financial statement, using a discount rate of 7.5%, 7.15%, your total net pension liability report as in your financial statement of $6.6 million, which means in the old days we always say how much was that being funded, so which is about like 75%. So the $6.6 million is actually representing the 25% that is not funded, which is on the face of a financial statement. What about the other post-employment benefit? This is the retiree benefit, and this is the first year implementing on your financial statement. Since the district has just started to put in your investment, so that's why, like, setting aside your money into your for the OPEB liability. So that's why we are not be able to use a discount rate which is similar to what you see in the pension, 7%. So the discount rate being used in your valuation was 3.11%, and that's representing a net OPEB liabilities of $9 million reflecting on your financial statement. Your current plan, what actually is 22.65 being funded, so the $9 million is really the rest of the 77% that is not funded, which is as recorded as a liability on your face of your financial statement. So the audit results, we are happy to issue an unmodified opinion, which means the financial statement are fairly presented in all material respect. Significant accounting policy have been consistently applied. All the estimates are reasonable, and the disclosure are properly reflected in these financial statements. Other results, there is no disagreement with management in terms of the accounting procedures and the audit procedures that we perform. No material weaknesses in internal control were noted. You have a really strong accounting team. However, because we identified one significant deficiency that has to do with a prior period adjustment that we corrected during the year, because we found a mistake that was being calculated on the pension accounting, and that was about like $560,000 being missed as in your deferred inflow of resource for pension. So that's why we are required to adjust your beginning net position. So other than that, like, we do not have any other accounting issues. So that's conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? I have one question. Would you please expand on the district's OPEB liability? What are the, and probably Dana can do that, what are the benefits that you're providing that is a liability?
Well, we actually have a presentation on this at the end of the meeting, on all of our benefits.
Okay. There you go.
Yes, but I could quickly answer the question if you'd like. For our retirees, they get the same level of benefit that the employees, active employees do, and that includes medical, dental, vision, and the HRA at the active employees' amounts.
And that's just for the employees or independent or dependents as well?
Dependents as well.
At the end of the thing, at the board's request, I believe it was your request, Rick, we have a overview of our benefits versus a survey of others in the areas where we're at. So we'll be doing that. I think it's one of the last things on the agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. I've in the past have asked this question, and since you're an auditor and you've done a lot of work with local city municipal governments, I'll ask you this question. With respect to our warrant run and making proper public disclosures about monies that are, being spent, bills that are being paid by, in this particular case, Central Basin, what is the purpose of having the warrant run other than the public disclosure? Is it also an approval of an expenditure?
Approval process is the internal control. Some cities may actually have the full disclosure in public meetings to disclose all the expenditure, and some cities decide, they're actually using an outside service called OpenGov.com, and those actually is pretty transparent. As a municipal government, you're required to make sure that your accounting is accountable and also transparent to the public. So that's why a lot of agencies decide to use the board meeting or council meeting as a forum to disclose all the expenditure and putting out the warrant run into your board meeting packet.
Okay, so it's, the purpose is public disclosure and that's
Yes.
it? Not,
It's part of your internal
Approval.
control also. Yeah,
Okay.
it's also approval and like sometimes the check is being cut, some agency will ratify those expenditures
Okay.
to be put it in to your accounting system.
okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Chacon, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you.
I have a question. So, in your reports, sir, you're looking at just the numbers they put down in our financial statements and reviewing our expenses and our revenue stream. Are you looking at revenue coming in?
Yes, actually, the audit, the scope of the work is to make sure that the financial statement are all fairly presented, which include the revenue here. So we are not here to do any projections or any forecast, but also like based on our experience, we talk to management team about the revenue itself, because based on what we see so far, the district has been experiencing a loss every year of about like $3.2 million in 2017, and then also in 2018 is about like $4.1 million. So based on my experience, that's basically representing, like especially looking at the depreciation and all the non-cash item, that means the district did not actually factor in those items into your water rate. So basically there are frankly discussion with the management team regarding this.
Is that in your audit?
It's in a communications letter, but it's not really in any of our independent auditors' report.
I noticed some charts that show groundwater. Is there a reason why you put groundwater on your charts? Total water deliveries?
Do you know what page it is?
Page 163 on mine. It's right after...
So are you talking about the statistical sections?
Yes, I guess last tab.
Statistical section is one of the sections that is required under the GFOA requirements, and the district elected to present the statistical section so that the district will be able to get the award from the GFOA regarding the excellent financial reporting. Also, GASB have one statement, GASB number 44. It's also included so that it provide the agency a structure on what needs to be presented. Water district are very, very unique, and also like the information in the statistical section is for informational only. Our audit report actually spelled it out that we are not opining on these information, but it is a really, really good information because it provides us a lot of analysis when we evaluate the revenue in your financial statement.
It's in the report as a request from staff so they can win an award, but it's not in your report as something that's important for you to look at the future and how our revenues are being generated?
We actually look at the history and opine on that 1 year revenue, but also we have a lot of discussion with management regarding the revenue stream and how you guys operate here. Because part of the what I call the going concern analysis, because I deal with a lot of distressed city, and the revenue and operating expense is really key, because the thing was, as the auditors, we are responsible to issue an opinion, but also will provide some insight of these numbers on an independent basis without violating our independence rule. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 15, discussion and approval of water quality protection plan, WQPP, transfer agreement with the City of Whittier.
President Apodaca. President, we don't have a motion on it. Do you have a motion and a second for
receive and
Capper to
file.
receive and file?
Yes, we have a motion to receive and file.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Getty?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director Osuli?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes. Now we go to item 15. I'm sorry.
Yes, good morning, directors. To start, this item was reviewed by the Engineering and Operations Committee in August and was also agendized to the August board meeting. It was tabled at last month's board meeting to be brought back this month to the September Engineering Committee and board meeting. Several questions were addressed at the August board meeting and September committee. Most questions were centered around contaminants that were previously an issue for the area surrounding the WQPP and treated by the WQPP, and as mentioned at that time, the most frequently monitored contaminants were TCE and PCE. Another question was regarding Whittier's future plans for the WQPP. Plans included removing the filters from the WQPP wells and implementing an involved contingency plan if contaminants were detected at a percentage of the regulated contaminant levels as already approved by the State Department of Drinking Water. There were several questions regarding the transfer of property and equipment. Staff have included the United States Bureau of Reclamation Property and Equipment Regulations as an additional attachment for this item, and this is to help address questions. One important thing to note is that the United States Bureau of Reclamation funded 100% of the property and equipment purchases for the WQPP project, and because of this, any revenue made from property sales would be turned over to the Bureau per their regulations. And if the property and equipment were transitioned, that is fine, as long as they are to be used as originally intended, which is to pump and treat groundwater. In addition to questions at the board meeting, there were a few questions at the engineering committee this month. And the first question is if a transition similar to this has been done here before in California, and if so, how did they handle it? And staff have contacted the funding representative at the Bureau of Reclamation and District Legal Counsel to see if they knew of any transitions. Neither had knowledge of any transitions similar to this. Staff asked if they had any suggestions on how to locate project transitions in California, and they did not have any suggestions on resources. However, they did mention that it will probably take a good amount of effort to gather this information, and this is due to the size of the state of California, the number of groundwater wells, and amount of contamination. And so staff would need time to complete a study such as this if that is what is desired. There was also a question regarding California contamination liability laws at the committee. Legal counsel provided some documentation to staff and mentioned contamination liability laws in California are some of the most complicated. And for the purposes of the WQPP, they did state that it may be a possibility that Central Basin and involved parties could be held responsible for managing contamination cleanup by the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Recovery Act of 1980, and that is a reason why legal counsel has included language in the transition agreement to separate ourselves from liability. Lastly, there was concern that transferring the WQPP project to the City of Whittier would hurt the district financially. Andrew and the Finance Department added language in the memo to address this concern under the fiscal impact section, and that language states that the district will be required to expense $4.3 million, which is the historical cost less accumulated depreciation that is currently recorded on the district's financial statements. And per the Finance Department, this will accelerate the $4.3 million of future depreciation into the current fiscal year. And this expense will not affect the district's debt coverage ratio calculation. And the last request was that this item be tabled until the financial analysis related to the transition was completed by the district's finance department. And there are several major projects underway in the finance department which has caused some delay for the financial analysis. And the finance department needs a little bit more time to complete this work. With that said, we have kept this item as action should the board decide to move forward with the agreement. And we also have the option to wait until next month. The financial analysis should be completed by then. And that concludes my update, unless you have any questions.
Questions?
Mr. President, Jackie, thank you first of all, but given the fact that we're still waiting for that financial analysis, I would move that we table this motion until next month so that we have time to receive that analysis and review it and have questions, get questions answered for that. So I would make that motion.
I might make just a comment. The financial analysis is simply a summary of all of the costs that we've incurred to date and all of the revenues we've incurred to date. We've done the cost side. I believe that's completed. So it's just the revenue side. And the agreement we have is that at the time that the costs and revenues are known, any deficit will be paid for. In other words, this is supposed to be a zero cost to us. So that's what we're, just so you don't have expectations of any fancy now, that's what it's going to be, a summary of all the costs we've expended over the 10 years or so we've been doing this, and then all the revenue we've received and whether there's a surplus or a deficit.
I'll still make that motion.
I'll second that motion. But I do have a couple of comments and also some requests for a little more information about this item.
Okay.
Yeah, and so my comments are, obviously our financial folks were here to talk to us about our fiscal condition and also folks that are going to help us refinance our bonds. And they have very specific numbers about what our assets are. And my big concern is any potential impact that this may have on that, and I would like to get something from either, well, actually from the financing folks stating that this is not going to impact our position with them.
I believe it's disclosed in the footnote, but we'll get you that.
Mm-hmm. And which kind of leads to the second question I had. On page 17 of the PUN Group's presentation under assets, is the 4.3 already included in that $90 million asset difference, the 90 and the $96 million asset difference? Is that already calculated there?
It is included in that amount.
Oh, okay.
So not in the loss, it's in the total, in the 90 million total. We have not, the financial document you're looking at is for last fiscal year. And no changes have taken place. So it's in the 90 million.
Correct.
Right, so it's in last year's.
Yeah, it's still in last year's, and still in this year's. We haven't taken anything to.
Okay, so then we'll see this 4.4 million reflected in next year's audit.
Yeah, if we did the transfer, you'd see it in next year's audit. You'll also see it in the preliminary official statement. I believe it says a footnote with a whole disclosure paragraph about what it means and what we're doing.
Okay, so we're basically removing $4.3 million from our asset portfolio by making this transfer.
Correct.
Okay. And there isn't going to be any impact on our rates when we refinance the bonds or
No,
anything?
because it's a non-operating, it's strictly, what we actually got out of each year was a depreciation expense. All of our costs were met, except for depreciation, and that actually, but as it turns out, correct me here, it has no impact other than our net. For example, it's just like our recycle system. Even if we don't change, if we don't touch a thing, it depreciates each year. This is just accelerated depreciation of an asset that doesn't generate positive income.
If I just clarify, it's my understanding, Andrew, that we'll have to show it as an expense, so it's going to lower our overall net income, but it will not go against how we calculate our debt cover ratio.
You're exactly correct. It's in technical accounting, it won't be an expense. Sometimes you see a capital contribution, but it's in essence treated as an expense. Just has a different name.
Right, but it's going to be an expense that goes against our net income, but it's not going to go against how we calculate our debt.
Yes.
I have a quick question, President. Kevin, when the financial analysis is going to be completed within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're either going to see a positive number or a negative number.
Correct.
Right? So what if there is the net is a positive number, what's going to happen?
We owe a refund to the agencies.
All right, and what is if it's a negative number?
They owe us money.
So the net is going to be zero?
Yes, that's
So it's not
the
going to
agreement.
impact the agreement or how we are structuring it?
No, this is strictly, the finances is strictly, that was the agreement when this thing was signed up. We're acting as trustees in the construction and operation of this. It was supposed to be at zero cost to the district.
So one way or another, we're going to be whole at the end of the process?
Yeah, and that's the entire intent, like I said. So we're halfway there. We have the costs all totaled up, and this because of the change in accounting staff and all the accounting firms over the years. It was a big to get the cost together. I think the revenue would go a little faster.
So, because there's already a motion on the table, would there be a detrimental factor involved articulated another month?
The detrimental factor, we have to, those folks.
Yeah, I would like to hear from
David,
please.
David Schickling, Public Works Director at
Board, yeah, Dave Schickling, City of Whittier. We have an agreement that through December with Central Basin that agreement was to negotiate and try to work on this transition. So that agreement is obviously becoming close to the end in December 31st. So as far as operation of the plant, one of the big things, like you say, the costs right now, most of that is being transferred to Santa Fe Springs because they're taking most of the water. By disconnecting the plant to these wells, it becomes a lot more efficient. As you technically know, that water table has dropped about 40 feet. These wells are very inefficient right now. Taking it off without that the head loss through this plant would help the efficiency of those wells, which would help the purveyor as we're cleaning things up over in that area. So as we keep pumping this and we're not able to use the contingency plan that the Department of Drinking Water approved, we still have to pump it through this 10 tanks that are filled with GAC that's in need of being changed out. So we're anxious to get in there and change that thing out. So any delays, potential contamination could form in those tanks, which we're a little concerned about. But we're ready to go whenever you guys tell us to go, whichever way it is.
Dave, I have a question. Are there 3 wells or 2 wells?
There's 2 wells.
Are those 2 wells on Whittier property, or is one?
No, one's on a lease for Army Corps of Engineers, and the other's on Central Basin property.
On Central Basin property?
Yes.
So they're both off-site?
They're both off-site.
Only the treatment facility is the vessels we're on.
That's correct. Yes, the 10 vessels.
Any other questions?
No.
If not, roll call.
Director Chucklin?
No.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director Osculi?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes.
President Apodaca?
No.
Failed.
Substitute motion.
Yeah.
Mr. President, substitute motion. Move to approve the agreement.
I second it. Roll call.
Director Chucklin?
No.
Director Gedney?
No.
Director Grajeda?
I abstain.
Director Hawkins? Director Osculi?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
No.
President Apodaca?
Yes.
Motion failed.
This we're going to revisit next month.
Just to put in perspective, if we do not approve it next month, we have to extend all the agreements because they expire in December that we have
If
for
the
this
only
process.
hang up is to see the financial analysis, we shouldn't have any problem, right? It's going to be ready.
Yeah, if that's all we're waiting for is a financial note, that's fine. Now, if there are other problems that people have with it, let's put them on the table now so we can have a robust discussion.
And my suggestion is, as soon as it gets ready, send it to everyone so they'll have ample time to review it before the board meeting and there won't be any questions. There will be some questions, but it will be answered efficiently.
Item 16, financial and asset management software renewals.
Good morning, directors. This item is related to two software packages that the district uses on a daily basis. The first one is our finance system, our New World Financial System. We've had this system since 2010. Part of the updates, part of the renewal includes updates and service for the next year. These are required for our year-end processing to update tax tables and to get any changes to reporting as necessary. In addition, the Finance Committee had raised some concerns related to the financial piece of the software package to ensure that it's still meeting the district's needs. What we'll do next year that we agreed on is to do a survey as well as to work with the finance team to ensure that the package is still meeting the district's needs, that there's no change to operations, and that we're not losing service as a result of using this software package. As it relates to the Hanson Asset Management package, again, this is another package used on a daily basis by our operators. On the field, we've been collecting asset data, and we are beginning the work order process portions of the system now. There's three pieces of the system: asset management, work management, and GeoAdmin. GeoAdmin it works collective with asset management to show our operators where our assets are within the mapping system, as well as web services, since they use them from the field. Unless there's any questions, the recommended motions are that the board authorize the software renewal of the New World Logos system for fiscal year 2018-19 for an amount not to exceed $59,172, and the renewal of the M4 Hanson Asset Management software package for fiscal year 18-19 for an amount not to exceed $31,394.
Make that motion.
Second.
I have a question, Mr. Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. Albert, is the Hanson Asset Management software, is that the one you've had for some time and we're not able to use it?
Yes, sir.
Did you just say you folks are using it now?
We are using it on the field now, yes, sir.
And is that because, who's doing the recycled water operations?
The Infomark, our operators.
I forgot who they are. I think they changed their name a couple of times.
Yes, sir.
Who is it? What is their name now?
Infomark. It's Infomark.
Infomark?
Inframark.
Okay. And they're the ones that taught you how to use it, or they're the ones using it?
They're the ones using it. We taught them how to use it. We provided them training through Hanson.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, Amy? Okay, roll call, please.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Gebbie?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes?
Director Hawkins? Director Escudero? Director Vasquez?
Yes.
President Apodaca?
Yes.
The next item is another software package. It's a little bit different. This is for our mapping software. Unlike the other two vendors, they don't work on a one-year basis. They work on a contract basis. And they're asking us to commit to a 3-year commitment. As a result of the 3-year commitment, though, we would see significant savings versus buying on a year-to-year basis through the software. Included in our Esri package, which is our mapping software, we get lower costs, 50% lower costs compared to retail. We get maintenance and updates, installation on any system needed, including third-party software vendors. We get Tier 1 and Tier 2 support. Unlike some of the previous agreements, this includes up to 50 users. We only have 20 employees. This does allow us to extend to our operators and allow them to have online access to mapping software packages. In addition, it gives us 10,000 online credits, which allows us to extend information publicly to the outside. And it allows us to get access to developer tools and image software that we otherwise wouldn't have. The term of the agreement is 3 years. I've asked them to extend from, our agreement expires in January. I have asked them to extend that through July 1st to meet our fiscal year, to follow our fiscal year schedule. So this agreement is actually 36 months plus 6 months, and that's why you'll see a little bit of a higher price overall to the $23,937.50 per year. One nice thing with having the agreement on a 3-year basis, there's no increases built into this agreement. So it's a flat rate for the for each year of those 3 years. Unless there's any questions, the recommended motion is that the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Esri for software and support renewals for its GIS mapping software and online licensing for an amount not to exceed $83,781, beginning January 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2022.
Albert, I got a quick question.
Yes,
What
sir.
if it was a year-to-year? What would the amount be?
They will not do small utility agreements on a year-to-year basis. We would have to buy through licensing, and on the licensing side, it costs us double. If we were to buy the same licenses with the same access, it would cost us double. One thing I did add as an attachment, and I did want to point this out for the finance side, because Esri is the only provider of their software, we can't buy it through a third party. They've included a letter in there that explains why, or explains that they are the only provider.
Mr. President, one quick question for Albert. Thank you very much for your presentation. What is the current structure of our agreement for receiving the same service?
In terms,
How are we doing it right now?
we currently have a 3-year agreement that's expiring.
Same structure as
Yeah, the only thing I did change as a result of this year is I asked them to follow a fiscal year schedule so that we wouldn't get caught in the middle.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Is this in the budget?
Yes, sir. It was included as a renewal for in the budget. Yes, sir.
Roll call.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Over second.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director School? Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes.
Thank you, directors.
Item 18, discussion and action on the Metropolitan Water District Board Chairmanship. Oral report.
All right, good afternoon. So next month, the Metropolitan Board members will be asked to cast their votes for a new chairperson. We are bringing this item back at the board's request for action. Last Tuesday, we had a visit from all 3 candidates who shared their experiences and their interest to assume duties as the board chair. So before you today is a recommended action that the board, number 1, directs the Central Basin Metropolitan Representative to vote for one of the following Metropolitan Board Chairman candidates: Steve Blois, Michael Camacho, Gloria Gray, or number 2, allow the Central Basin Metropolitan Representative to cast their individual vote for one of the Metropolitan Board Chairman candidates.
I'd like to make the motion that let the board members cast their own vote.
I apologize, that the board members cast their own vote, or is that the...
Metropolitan board members.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I made the request that this item be brought before the board because I thought it could be an opportunity for our entire board to weigh in on this issue. We have 3 candidates that are interested in seeking the support of the Central Basin Water District, and as many of you know, and we've discussed, we have 3 very important issues before the agency, which I believe we talked a little bit about during the last meeting when we had the candidates come before us. And those issues are, one, the fact that the Metropolitan Water District allocates a little over $700,000 during their 2-year fiscal cycle for conservation programs. Unfortunately, we're unable to spend all the money because of how the program is structured. The second issue of importance for Central Basin at the Metropolitan Water District is the whole issue of the possibility of our agency losing a Metropolitan Water District director. And as you all know, and as we reported during our last meeting, we have been working with some of our fellow colleagues at the Metropolitan Water District to figure out a way for us to maintain both of our directors. The third issue that I believe is very important to the Central Basin is the issue of making sure that we can secure local resources funding, because our local resources funding has declined over the years. So in my opinion, I believe it's very important that we weigh in as an agency together on who will support us on those issues that are important to our agency. So with that in mind, I requested that we bring this discussion before the entire board so that we may consider doing that. I believe those questions were asked of the candidates when we had them before us the last time they were here. There have been of these three candidates, I have to say that there has been some considerable opposition to our position on those issues, and I believe that we should be looking out for our district, and that we should look to support individuals that are going to support the issues that are important to our constituents. So that said, I would like to pass the discussion on to anyone else.
Mr. President, I have a couple questions regarding this process, I guess, and we have an action pending. Let's say down the road, everyone's going through this process, and you have 38 members on the agency. How do they choose that chairman? Is it a simple majority? And is it each board member who makes that vote? But how do they choose that person? Is it just the majority and they decide?
Yeah, they take a vote, and it's a greater than 50%.
But you vote based on assessed valuation. It's not the number of people, it is the value.
But you have to have a majority over 50%.
Exactly.
And if that doesn't occur, what then happens? I guess that's my question. If you don't get 50%, if the three people running break up the vote enough where you don't have a 50% majority, what then occurs?
What they've done in the past is the lowest vote drops off, and then the other two go.
Take another vote?
Yeah, they do
Yes.
another vote. They do it sequentially. As when they were picking, when Jeff got selected as general manager, it was 4 votes.
Okay.
Because there were a number of candidates. But you drop them off and you go down. This time we only have 3, so I doubt it'll take more than 2 votes.
Right.
Yeah. And also I want to add that as a matter of background, different agencies, handle this issue, how their board decides to handle it. So, for example, the City of LA will be interviewing the candidates, and the City of LA will, the directors for the City of LA will decide in concert with the mayor who they're going to lend their support to. The San Diego Water Quality Authority also conducts a similar process that we have on this occasion, where they invite, actually enclosed, it's not an open meeting in San Diego, but they meet with the candidates and they, ask questions, and then they, vote as a delegation on who they're going to support, and then they take that vote to the board. Other agencies allow their member to make the decision. So it really varies. However, I understand that historically Central Basin has allowed the directors to vote individually on who they were interested in supporting. And I just decided to try something new. I really feel that it's very important for all of our board members here at this agency to, have some relationship with the process of selecting who the chairman is, because we're all going to see the impacts of the decision there. So I requested that this matter be brought to the board. Thank you.
So I have a second question, and Director Chacon, I understand you have your motion sitting out there in space. We're waiting, but allow me my next question. So the first motion directs the Central Basin Met reps to vote for one of the following chairman candidates. That process of this board selecting who that would be, is that a simple majority? Is that 5 out of 8?
Yes.
How does that process work? Just simple majority?
5 out of 8.
No, it's 5 out of 8.
It's
We need 5 to.
We need 5 to do anything.
Okay.
Board level.
So if we were to go with recommended motion number 1, we need 5 votes for one of the candidates.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So my questions are done now, Director Chacon.
Director School, what was your motion?
My motion was to let the Metropolitan Board directors kind of do their own thing over there. You know, I don't want to tie anybody's hands. If Ms. Vasquez has a relationship with somebody and she feels that person is going to get us what we need, then I feel she should cast her vote the way she thinks it's better for the district. I also feel the same thing for Director Hawkins, even though he's not here. You know, I'm not there all the time. I'm not mingling with those folks.
I second that. Roll call.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins? Director Oscui?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we move on, I'd just like to make a statement that I think I would have liked for the board to have given direction to the representatives, but I don't think we would have gotten that today. And I want to thank Director Vasquez for trying. I think the board should always give direction, but if it's not there, then the second best is just to let the representatives do the best they can.
Well, knowing the 2 candidates, myself, and being a member of the Metropolitan for over 12 years, it would be very difficult with this board to get one of those candidates. So the best thing is to let those individuals who they feel would be the best, do the best job for Central Basin, support them. And that's what I think is the best for at this time.
Director Apodaca, in the interest of time, I was going to propose a reorganization of this remaining part of the calendar. That's okay? I propose we defer to a later date the legislative update. I don't think there's anything substantive. And the financing schedule and the burn agreement, there's nothing important. We can give those out to the directors written form. So I propose we go directly to item 20 and then to item 23. Item 20 being a recycled water demonstration presentation, which Mr. Whitaker has very patiently waited for a couple hours for.
So we go to item 23?
21st.
Okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Item 23.
21st one. 21st and then 23rd, sir. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Good morning again, directors. We wanted to provide you with an update on a recycled water project staff have been working on with the Water Replenishment District, or WRD. To start, we have some slides for you today to help illustrate the project for you. This first slide may look familiar. The purple lines depict our recycled water main lines, and the light purple and one dark purple circular shapes represent the pump stations. They are labeled with their names. We also show the district's pressure reducing station with the hourglass shape in blue. The San Jose Creek plant is at the top right of the diagram, and the Los Coyotes plant is at the bottom in a beigeish brown color. WRD's ARC and Vanderland's plant are in the green rectangles, and the spreading grounds are in yellow. To provide a brief history for this project, several months back in 2017, WRD approached Central Basin to look into providing up to 4,000 acre-feet per year of recycled water to the spreading grounds, and this would be for groundwater recharge. Meaning the Central Basin would deliver recycled water from the San Jose Creek plant in the northern area to the Rio Hondo spreading grounds via an existing pipeline in Mines Avenue and Pico Rivera. For reference, all of the infrastructure to do this is located above the pressure reducing station, shown as the dark blue hourglass. And in addition to using the Mines Avenue pipeline, we would need to construct either a new pipeline or use infrastructure owned by others to increase capacity to meet the 4,000 acre-feet per year goal. Norris and Roman identified a number of alternatives for us to look into in the future for that amount of water, and these alternatives are attached to this memo as Exhibit B. The idea at that time was that WRD would in turn provide supplies from the south to make up the difference to cover the demands of the district. And during that time, Central Basin tasked Tetra Tech, our on-call consultants familiar with our hydraulic model and system, with investigating these possibilities. Some time has passed since we've been looking at accomplishing deliveries of 4,000 acre-feet per year. And as you are already aware, we have been working very closely with the sanitation districts, and in return, they have helped us tremendously. They have generated approximately 0.75 to 0.8 million gallons per day, which is approximately 840 to 896 acre-feet per year of new recycled water supply, and this would be at the Los Coyotes plant. They did this by reducing the frequency of backwashing their filters or by reducing the volume of water used to backwash their filters. This new supply is available for new projects or recycled water customer connections while they resolve environmental issues. And because this was only able to be accomplished at the Los Coyotes plant, we have to keep the amount of recycled water we take from the San Jose Creek plant in the north the same. And so one thing of importance is that we are still capable of connecting sites that will be supplied by San Jose Creek supplies, and supplying water to WRD would fall in this category, with the Rio Hondo Spreading Grounds located north of the PRV. We are hopefully accomplishing this by replacing any water supplied to new customer connections or projects in the area north of the pressure reducing valve by an increase in take from Los Coyotes. And this can be done by making adjustments at the district's pressure reducing station, the blue hourglass on the slide. And these minor adjustments will keep more recycled water supply in the northern area, and in turn will starve the southern area of its usual supply from the north. And the system will then react by the Cerritos pump station, revving up to fill the new void in the south, which will then pull more supplies from the Los Coyotes plant. And with that said, staff thinks it's best to start smaller scale and see how delivering recycled water to the Rio Hondo Spreading Grounds is first going to work. Both district staff and WRD are interested in moving forward with a demonstration project. Central Basin already has commitments and investments for approximately half of the available water, give or take, that we're getting from the sanitation districts. And Central Basin has estimated that the amount of recycled water for use in a demonstration project with WRD is approximately 380 to 400 acre-feet per year, and this is as long as the system capacity allows. And WRD will have access to available supplies until district commitments to others are called upon, and supply to WRD and the spreading grounds will then be reduced as new connections are made by Central Basin. A demonstration project using the Mines Avenue pipeline will require establishing a new connection from the Mines Avenue pipeline to the Rio Hondo Spreading Grounds. Can I have the next slide, please, Albert? This map of the Mines Avenue pipeline is attached to this memo as Exhibit A, and the pipeline terminates adjacent to the bike path in an unpaved area in the dirt currently. And as I mentioned earlier, Tetra Tech is modeling hydraulics and will confirm delivery flow and volume capabilities of the Mines Avenue pipeline. And in addition to hydraulic modeling, staff are looking to use our on-call consultants to engineer a new service connection at the spreading grounds. And at this time, staff are working on developing a scope of work to accomplish that, and will obtain quotes as soon as possible. And we are also looking to establish a cost share agreement with WRD for design and construction of the connection, with WRD handling all permitting needs. And as we've had discussions with WRD regarding costs, we will be giving you updates. We've had discussions about water purchases as well, but nothing is solidified completely yet. So we'll let you know as we move along with the process. And that concludes my update.
Mr. Whitaker is here.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you, Board of Directors. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think this really presents a great working opportunity between the two agencies. We're looking to secure new water resources for the future as pumping increases over time. Our replenishment